Hello and welcome to the next episode of the e-commerce practitioners. This time we've got a gentleman by the name of Mr. Sumit Jairat, who's an experienced person into the executive space for retail, wholesale, both. He's led so many businesses from the front. He was the managing director of Forever Unique. Actually, I'll let Sumit make your introduction yourself and then talk about it. Hi, Sumit.
And thanks for the invitation to join this podcast today. I've got over 20 years of experience, both from a brand building point of view, but then putting that into operational practice as well at the same time. So worked across both B2B and B2C, dealing with, major retailers across the UK, Europe, Middle East, the US, and how we've kind of transitioned over those 20 years in terms of where the business started to where the business currently, is at the moment, and how we face the challenges through, I think, really testing times during COVID, which really redefined where we positioned ourselves during that period.
Thank you so much, Sumit, for taking time out and joining us on this podcast. Today, what we're going to go through is how did you transition from the B2B world of the business, which is 100% focused pretty much on B2B? How did you transition it to the B2C during the COVID time, and how did that fare out? What were the things that you were involved? What did it take to get it to that successful stage? Okay, so if I just quickly ask you, what has been your experience overall from a B2B perspective, overall sales experience in the UK, Europe, from a B2B perspective?
So in terms of experience and throughout my journey, I think B2B has always played a very prominent part in business success. And because we were driving a brand to position ourselves with key retailers in the initial stages was, I would say, one of the most important things that we did as a business, and a decision that we took, because what it allowed us to do was almost test the market in terms of our product. Each one of these retailers had obviously their own customer base, but they also had budgets that they would market to, the consumers in terms of positioning themselves. But it also allowed us to position and align alongside other brands at the same time. So it was a very cost-effective, but also a very fruitful way of entering the market in the initial stages, because it allowed us to sit alongside, brands that we almost aspired to be during the initial stages. But then it also meant we weren't paying huge amounts of budget behind marketing in the initial stages. We were almost riding off the back of what these wholesalers were doing, where they were, I'm talking late 90s to early 2000s, where digital marketing was not as prominent as what it is, and as we know it today. It was more, imprint or billboards or celebrity placement, and newspaper, good old tabloid newspaper advertising, where we had product positioned on key celebrities that really helped define us. I think one of the really defining moments was an account that I used to work with in Chelsea, and she used to actually have Kate Middleton at one of her customers, and we managed to get one of our Forever Unique dresses on that client, on Kate Middleton. And that was one of the key moments that would have, I think, positioned Forever Unique in the market that it was. Now, had we tried to do that off our own back, I think it would have taken, absolutely a lot of money to get us to where we wanted to go, but also, no guarantee. So, timing, luck, everything had to be on our side. But I also believe that, the wholesale really allowed us to position that. Another kind of key aspect was as a startup brand, without having the wholesale, again, meeting the supply chain demands where, we had to obviously commit to minimum order quantity with new suppliers and factories that we were working with, because we were new to market. So I would say, the wholesale aspect and the B really helped kind of position us and define us in the early stages as a brand.
Brilliant. No, that's very good to hear. And help me understand, Sumit, what were the main challenges in the B2B space pre-COVID era? Initially, when you started off, what were the biggest challenges that you faced? How were you handling the marketing side of it? How were you positioning? Because I'm sure the women's fashion space is a fairly crowded space. How are you trying to find your niche and build your own
Yeah,
client base?
a- I think, you know, we really stuck to a USP. You know, we were one of the first brands that launched occasion wear. And in particular, we went after this prom market, which was basically school leavers, university leavers, a very Americanized concept. And
Mm.
I would say we were the very first brand in the UK to really kind of capture that. So we didn't diversify our product offering. We very much played to our strengths and stuck to our USP. And that became our handwriting and what we became known for. But it was an expensive exercise. Obviously, there's a huge risk involved. We invested heavily in terms of doing trade shows. We did a lot of trade press, and Draper's Magazine was a very, you know, prominent publication that we were a part of during those early stages. But it required constant reinvestment in terms of, you know, yes, we were driving revenue, but all of that revenue was being reinvested back into the business to position ourselves. So I'd say it took us a good 2-3 years to at least cement our place in the market. And at the same time, identifying ourselves in key retailers. We weren't, you know, trying to position ourselves anywhere and everywhere. It was very much strategic in terms of where we wanted to position ourselves, because we knew that if we were in with the right accounts, then, you know, the bigger clients and the bigger accounts that we wanted to onboard, it very much gave us the kudos and credibility by being positioned in those key accounts. Had we, excuse the phrase, but had we prostituted the brand everywhere and anywhere, we would have devalued the brand as well at the same time. So it was very much about strategic partnerships that we wanted to very much be in the right accounts that would give us longevity out of this. So I think, you know, it was a tough initial kind of period. And again, being at the forefront, you know, not being hiding in the background by sending out, you know, sales team members. It was very much, you know, myself, the business owners, trying to understand and work with our customers so we could get that perfect balance between product, quality, price in the initial stages, because that really kind of laid the foundations for where we grew beyond that, really.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So if I understand it correctly, you were uniquely positioning the whole product and the company towards the prom market, which was you, and you were one of the first movers in that space, giving you
Yeah,
the and
yes, very much.
stuck to that rather than trying to be everywhere.
Yes.
That helped you create that capability. Now, what were the biggest challenges that you faced at that point, pre-COVID era, in
From
expanding
a
that space?
I think the hardest thing was the type of product that we offered was very much, you know, an in-store experience. You know, you had to see customers face to face. You know, yes, we had photo shoots and, you know, printed catalogs and stuff, but clients wanted to have more access to, you know, whether it was what stock you had available, because what you've got to remember is it's great onboarding with new customers, but their order quantities are very cautious to begin with. They
Yep.
don't want to, you know, take huge risks. We also didn't want them to take huge risks because you would much rather have a better sell through and, you know, they come back for repeat orders. So I think one of the biggest challenges was, even though we were committing to inventory in the initial stages, how could we get that inventory across to our customers in terms of what stock we had available? You know, it was very difficult and it was very manual in terms of they didn't have access to what we now have, which is, you know, digital portals that they can log into and they can see real-time live inventory. At that stage, you know, if someone rang to say how many pieces of a particular dress you had in, it'll be, I'll call you back in 10 minutes, and you physically go to the rail, count how many you had in each size ratio, and then give them a call back. There was no inventory management in that sense. It was all manually done.
That must have been quite a huge challenge, actually, just getting the clear visibility of your stock.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you know, even off the back of doing trade shows, we used to use like a manual tally system where we'd go through every paper order, have a list of all of our styles, and, you know, you'd mark 4 down and then put a cross in to mark your 5th, and then you tally up and place your purchase orders. So I've very much been at the grassroots level of how that used to be. And, you know, seeing that change has been, you know, a game changer. And on a serious note, you know, everything is about your critical path, your speed to market, and, you know, the evolvement of, you know, the technology side of things really helps us grow massively over a very quick period of time. And had that not been introduced, I dread to think what we would be doing today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, coming to the most interesting part is what impact did you see from COVID? Once the COVID hit, how was the B2B business side impacted? And what was the genesis and how did you think of transition and what were the initial challenges that came in there?
So I think pre-COVID, I would say 80% of our business was very much B2B and 20% of it, even though we knew that was a growth area for us, e-commerce or B2C was challenging just because mainly the type of product that we were offering was more suited to an in-store experience. A client that wanted to pay in excess of £350, £400 on a dress didn't trust the online method. They wanted to go in to try on for quality, for fit, to make sure that the style suited that individual. So even though we had an online presence and there was a real appetite to grow that B2C side of things, we found it challenging. We invested heavily in in an e-commerce team that covered all disciplines, from marketing managers to e-commerce managers to PR. We had a full suite and that was an expensive investment. But the biggest challenge was that we were predominantly dealing with bricks and mortar stores, and we were also an occasion wear brand. And during COVID, we were in lockdown. So bricks and mortar couldn't operate and there was no occasion to go to. So our business was completely null and void in the sense that there was no demand whatsoever. What do you do in that circumstance? We had stock commitment that was coming in. So of course, you have to honour that and we brought that stock in, but we couldn't do anything with it. So it was sat there and it was tied up cash flow. But we had access to a customer database of in excess of 150,000. And, rather than sit there and let that customer lie dormant or potentially go elsewhere, we redefined A, our business approach, and B, also our product offering. So for the initial sort of 18 months during COVID and into the early parts of 21, rather than stick to our USP of just having occasion wear, we actually launched a more accessible lifestyle collection, which included things like pajamas, loungewear, tracksuits, blouses, denim, but still with our handwriting and still with our kind of, forever unique bling, as I used to call it, in terms of, it still had that point of difference, that glitz and glam at the end of the day. At a much more kind of affordable and accessible price point as well, because, times were tough. People were, not working. Either they were, furloughed or they were working reduced hours. But what could we do to create that demand? And again, how can we engage with that customer? So we created, forever unique community where, how do you carry out house parties during COVID with your family and, really try and interact with that customer. But what we also realized was that we had a lot of data that we hadn't tapped into previously, where we had a one fits all approach to marketing where, we would offer out a blanket marketing email and all of a sudden, you get 10% of customers that would come back and engage with you. Same with our social content. We really learned the importance of being able to kind of segment and understand your customer base in terms of what can we do to make their experience personalized during that.
So just another question. Now you talk about personalization. Now, see, the majority of the business was focused on the B2B side, wholesale.
Yeah.
Typically, if you look at it, people who are into the wholesale business, they don't really think, of course, they will think from a product positioning perspective for end consumer, but they don't really think as a retailer. Retailer would have a much stronger bent of mind towards understanding the customer more, personalizing the services, personalizing the delivery, personalizing the marketing. Wholesalers would typically not think in those terms. It's just about the mindset. How did that shift in the mindset or the paradigm shift happen? And what was the journey of that transition, getting the mindset shift from B2B to B2C?
I think the mindset shift happened very quickly because we saw a very quick turn in terms of results. And of course, having that access and that ease of understanding the data and having the right people alongside us to understand that was really kind of pivotal. But the shift happened for us personally very quickly for us to realize, actually, pre-COVID, why couldn't we have utilized that personalization from a wholesale perspective as well? For me, as I mentioned right at the start of this conversation, the importance of wholesalers having good sell-through and not just looking at them as a number, and in terms of, right, you've committed to your order, my duty now is to deliver to you and collect payment. No, actually, I want you to have, a successful partnership with us, because that meant I would get loyalty. It meant that, I was keeping my competition at bay. But more than anything else, it meant that I was getting repeat business out of that customer, because they knew that what we were offering them was tailor-made to their customers. So what it allowed us to see was insights in terms of each season we would evolve our collections with, new shapes. People didn't want to have a repeat from the previous season. We worked in a fashion model that wasn't, a staple product that we were offering season after season. People wanted move-ons. A big kind of majority of our customer base was, affluent, or, people that had disposable income that wanted to spend, but also, they were going to key events where they didn't want to repeat the same outfit over and over. So very difficult for us to repeat on a best-selling line. But what it allowed us to do was get an insight in terms of what our best sellers were for particular customers. How do we move that, item on in terms of evolving it and making it fresh? But then going back to that same consumer, because we had the personal data and the insights in terms of what they wanted, and say to them, look, we know that these were your best sellers last season. Let us present to you now our move-ons. It was perfect energy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But a lot of times I've seen that the B2B typically businesses don't really think from that perspective.
Not at all. No.
Yeah. They
No.
typically think from the perspective, let me just ask, the objective is just to get the order. From a sales management team, perspective, they just focus purely on getting the order and then servicing that order to some extent. And that's about it.
Yeah. And the knock-on effect to that, Vikram, is that, most businesses end up in a position where they will overorder stock. Then they've got surplus inventory that ends up going into markdown. It's not a sustainable model either. But more than anything else, it also devalues your brand. Whereas if you can tap into as much insight as you possibly can, you keep your relationship with your suppliers going. My hit rate with my suppliers improved so much because I wasn't sampling, 30, 40 styles with one supplier and only ordering 5 because that was the orders that we got. I was actually condensing that because I already knew before we went into our design development that these were the shapes that had a good success rate. So actually what they found was that the orders were condensed, but they were bigger orders. So it actually didn't only just improve customer relationship, but it also improved our supplier relationships too.
Yeah, no, of course. And that is the key at any business, really. Okay, now that you've already had that mindset shift, you've made the decision to move towards the B2C and focus a bit more on that. What were the initial steps that you think about, and how did you go about moving your website, upscaling your website, and getting it to a stage where it could serve your new vision? How did you go about it? What were the initial steps?
I think for us, the most important thing was to find a solution of technology that would, naturally become a seamless addition to what we do operationally as a business. And I think, during my time, a lot of my involvement with technology was mainly B2B technology. It was order management systems, VMS, and accounting software. We didn't really have, a website that I was involved in prior to that. We'd onboarded with, a specialist e-commerce team as far as I was aware. And, they were very much kind of the key to driving that side of the business. However, when COVID hit, of course, we had to restructure our business. There wasn't a wholesale business initially for the first couple of years until we reintroduced that back in 2022. And so the importance to me of having, and I've sat in front of many different, software companies and many different web developers, was how do we make that, switch to a solution that A, will obviously make the process a lot more seamless, meaning that every touch point is very much kind of in sync with one another. So we knew that every aspect of what we did as a business, whether that was initially with our design development through to sampling stage, through to getting, wholesale orders in, how much of that inventory were we going to split in terms of what do we offer out to B2B versus B2C? Yeah. Invoicing, accounting, it had to be a 360 solution for us. And more importantly was anyone that we were going to work with had to become an extension of our team. It wasn't that we were going to kind of change our way or they were going to change theirs. It's learning off each other. We had what we thought in our head in terms of best practice for our business, but understanding best practice from, a solution perspective and also forward thinking where, as we know with any system and any solution, I always look at it like a car. Over a period of time, that car will start having issues, and then it will need upgrades to it, or eventually it will be decommissioned. So we were on a Magento solution, and our hand was forced because we had in-house developers, and the version that we were on was being decommissioned. So the choice was, do you move over to Magento 2? We looked at various other options as well at the same time, Shopify being one of those. A big important aspect of it was obviously we had a really strong relationship in a software provider for our wholesale business. And, that was a really big kind of decision because what we felt we had was working in all aspects, but it was working actually, if we're being really honest with you, it was working for the wholesale aspects of the business, right, but it wasn't, sufficient enough for us to do anything from an e-commerce point of view. And actually in those initial stages when we launched our e-commerce business, which would have been around about 2013, 2014, if record, serves me well. And we didn't have any synergy. Whatever stock came in, manually we were allocating it to the web, but then there was no, inventory management for that. There was no order management system. We didn't really have much control in terms of how our returns rate came in. So we actually didn't benefit from having the two separate pools. So the decision we made as a business that if we were going to move over to a solution, it needed to service all areas of the business and synchronize that at the same time.
And that worked out really well. And what were the initial challenges that you had once you launched the website, the new website?
I think the initial challenges we had was that, again, even though we had an experienced team, COVID didn't allow us to, retain that team during the initial stages. So I think the biggest challenge was that, I was left with the challenge of, can you drive this e-commerce business forward? And, I took on the reins, but we had various contracts in place and long-term contracts with marketing agencies that really disappointed me, if I'm being brutally honest with you, because yes, I understand that everyone has their own business objectives and that's what they want to run. But what they didn't want to kind of get to was the crux of the matter in terms of how can we market to your customer base in a way that, would allow you to start seeing growth happen. Initially, it was that I would say was the biggest challenge for us was how do we, wind down these contracts or come up with an agreement that we can come out of term with them. And my approach was simple in the sense that I wanted to work with partners that had an invested interest in helping the business grow. And my ethos is we eat from the same plate. If it works for us, you'll benefit from it as well at the same time if we're in a partnership together. And I think, having that approach of really streamlining the amount of connections and contracts that we had. And in the end, I was working with 3 contacts in total. One of them was you, Vikram. One was the marketing agency that we had that looked after paid social, paid search, SEO, and then we had an email service provider. And that was the only 3 connections that we had, and a very, condensed team in the sense that, where we were 30 strong in our e-commerce department pre-COVID, we reduced the numbers down to 6. And actually, even post-COVID, all the way up to sort of late 2023, early 24, we actually realized that we don't need, a huge team, because all of a sudden technology allowed a lot of automation to kick in. It gave us so much more insights in terms of actually what we can really nail down on. It actually helped us streamline a lot of our processes. And in turn, obviously it helps when, the results were positive off the back of it too.
Yep. No, absolutely. I understand. Sometimes it can get very tricky when you are having too many contracts with too many vendors and agencies, and it becomes a nightmare to manage all of them. That's a problem that people don't realize in the initial stages, and it just builds up over a period of time.
And it becomes a little bit of, no one wants to take accountability. It becomes a little bit school playground in terms of the blame game. And this way, we were all aligned in terms of our approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, coming down to the next element of this whole thing is, of course, managing operations for a B2B business and managing operations and logistics for a B2C business are two different ball games altogether. In B2B, you're probably sending boxes and pallets, you're shipping those, and managing those is different from shipping or packaging one item and then shipping it across and then tracking it through. How did you manage all of those logistical elements from an operational perspective, from warehouse and staff perspective? How did that all work through?
I think operationally, because we were so well versed in the B2B side of warehouse management and dispatching and having a very kind of rigid system in place, that gave us a good foundation. I'm not going to lie, it was an eye-opener in terms of when we started to drive the volumes from a B2C point of view, certainly during peak trading periods for us. How do you, manage that, and how do you kind of understand the challenges that brings? Initially, it was really tough. It was tough in all aspects, whether that was, the speed of processing orders, understanding how much in terms of staff that I required, because, we weren't constantly trading at peak all the time. Plus we had deliveries coming in as well at the same time. Returns, I keep alluding to returns. Returns was one of the biggest challenges that we had throughout that time in that process. And more importantly, we couldn't have done it without having a robust, warehouse management system and an inventory management system in place as well at the same time. So I know we had many conversations in terms of how we can evolve that together. It was difficult because what I thought would be the ideal approach to it, actually by the end of the process and the solution that we put in place was very different, because I was looking at it from a on the ground perspective, and actually what you and the team were saying to me was, actually, Sumit, we can do a lot of automation here and a lot of processes that will allow you to do that. So in the end, we had fully kind of integrated WMS system that was linked to the handheld devices. We had these mobile devices that all of our warehouse team would go around. So they'd have their pick orders on there. They would go to the bin, scan the barcode, scan the actual product barcode, another third scan before they packaged it. They'd scan then the shipping label. Customer would get notification straight away to let them know that the order has been packed. So every step of the journey, the customer was involved, but we were also on top of, knowing how much output we were getting from individuals in terms of picking orders, how many returns we were processing, the reasons for returns. So we had to do that manually. Honestly, I don't know how we would have turned that around. And, the most important thing was that we managed to do that in-house, where a lot of businesses that I know of and other businesses that I've worked in will outsource that as an additional cost through third-party logistics, to be able to do that fulfillment. We actually managed to, execute that in-house as well at the same time. So, huge cost saving for us as well too.
Yep, absolutely. I remember. Yep. Okay, so next was, of course, around the marketing side of it. Now, doing marketing to trade businesses, physical stores, and doing marketing to end consumers are two different ball games altogether. Plus, handling the returns from stores and the returns from end users are again two completely different things. How did that transition happen? What was your approach in managing all of that? And last but not least, how was the customer acquisition working through? What was the proportion you were spending on PPC? What was the organic strategy to get new customers? How was that all working through?
Yeah, sure. So from a marketing point of view, I would say initially it was very much about new customer acquisition, because during that period of COVID, the customer that we had, even though, we were offering them a different product set in terms of that lifestyle collection that we launched, what we found was a lot of those customers were of a slightly older generation. They didn't necessarily shop online. So for us, it was about how do we tap into that new customer acquisition? So we, segmented our existing data that we had in terms of our subscribed users and tried to use some form of, variation in terms of our marketing strategy to those. So whether that was doing a mix of both email marketing, offering different sort of landing pages when they came onto the website, so that element of customization dependent on the customer set that we were targeting, personalization in terms of their shopping experience. So, being able to visually merchandise collections on the website based on, which user was coming to site, but then also across, PPC, paid social, our own organic social channels, is offering that aspect of almost a little bit more accessibility, because where we were selling products at £350, £400, all of a sudden our average sell price was £100, £150. And so it was almost like we remodeled the business and we modeled the brand. And then how we then, really started to delve into that was once that customer came to site, understanding the customer journey. And that, again, from the initial startup in terms of what the marketing companies were offering us, is then being able to spend time, with yourself and with your team in terms of, we can capture this data for you, Sumit. We had a referral program in place. We did, a lot of work in terms of customization, in terms of whether that was upselling product, being able to do kind of like the post-purchase kind of, comms with our customers as well at the same time. And we had all of a sudden this big kind of index of data that we were utilizing to our benefit. We never used to carry out trade on a weekly basis. I mean, we were doing 10-minute, trade on a daily basis, and then we do a weekly recap. We were understanding seasonal trends. We were understanding, all aspects of customer habits as well at the same time.
Basically, it became a hugely data-driven decision-making process.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. And the same with, you touched on returns from a B2B and returns from a B2C perspective. Again, yes, B2B was a lot easier for us because typically you could offer either exchanges or credit notes, whereas actually we managed to offer that even to our, B2C customers, where you're actually retaining some of those profits. So rather than just accept, a return from a customer, let's really start to understand why that return comes back. One, because we obviously want to retain that sale and retain the customer. But more importantly, we don't want to make the same mistakes over and over again. Again, the data that came off the back of that, but also some of the solutions that we put in place where, customer had access to the portal rather than return the item. Can we offer them exchanges, which we were able to do? Can we swap sizes for them so that, they're not having to return the item back and that's the end of the transaction? Or I know towards the latter end, we were talking about, and we managed to look at a solution of, actually, can we offer a customer the ability to return, but without having to refund the customer that money? Can we offer them an incentive, almost like a loyalty program, so that, hit by the returns? And more importantly, returns are, unhealthy from a business point of view, but also we really wanted to focus on that sustainable, aspect of the business as well, where, just churning out numbers wasn't what we wanted to entertain.
True. Yeah, returns are very, very unhealthy and very difficult to handle a lot of times. And you basically incentivize them to keep that order in place, maybe return the product, give them something else, incentivize for the next order. I think very good strategy to, to reduce your overall loss from the return, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mitigate that. Now, implementing all of this is, of course, all good, but I think at the end of the day, systems, tools, processes, they're only as good as the people following that and implementing all of that. That comes into play team. When you've got a team who's delivering all of that, how did you go about managing the team, educating the team from the perspective of transitioning from B2B to B2C? How did the team size get affected over that transition when you moved along? Was there a proper training that you established, and what were the different elements that involved into that process?
So initially, I took it upon myself to very much first build a relationship with yourselves. And that for me was vital in terms of us being able to establish, a set of processes that we were going to learn for you to understand what that structure looked like, but also for me to understand what that looked like. So, I think both you and I were both very hands-on during that, initial onboarding stage. And then once I fully invested in, and likewise from your side, it was a case of, look, we have to get the team on board with this, and not that we're going to kind of change our direction every time someone comes up with, a flaw in the system. It's how do we smooth out those processes? So I think having the team invested in it and having, the leaders invested in it at the same time is equally important, because what I have experienced in previous experiences is that a lot of the time it becomes a blame game. It's not our fault. The solution doesn't work properly, and it ends up going round and round in circles, and nothing gets fixed. What we actually did, and what I really kind of, hang my hat on, is that we identified the problem, we discussed a solution, we found the best practice, and everybody was on board with that. There was no my way, your way. It was very much kind of aligned and in sync. And that really, to me, was important, because yes, I understand the demands of my business. Yes, I understand, the demands of the team, the individuals, operational demands, but play to each other's strengths. Our strength was what we were good at, and, the Better Commerce team play to their strengths. And that synergy between the two meant that we were educating each other along the way. And what we ended up with, I think, and I feel, was a solution that was suited for our business needs, but it was best practice. And really, we managed to streamline the team massively. Pre-COVID, we were 100 strong, working only from head office. Okay, we saw a downturn in business during COVID, and, our hand was forced and we had to make decisions. But we saw a rapid growth from 21 till the end of 23. And, pre-COVID, that team would have doubled in size. Post-COVID, because we had the solution in place and, the support as well. Yes, we grew the team, but we grew it only where essential, because actually a lot of the work that we needed to carry out was being done for us, and a lot of automation was now in place. So actually, just to give you a very kind of top line figures, I think that the heights we reached e-commerce wise pre-COVID, the best year we had was 2019, where we achieved 4 million of revenue online. We moved to a new solution in August of 2020. Correct me if I'm...
Yes, somewhere around that. Yeah,
I'm
that's
right.
correct. Yeah.
August of 2020. And by the end of 2022, we'd achieved 9.5 million of revenue online, with a team no more than 12 strong, working in that e-commerce marketing department. Of course, we had designers and product developers that were working alongside accounts teams, warehouse. But just in the e-commerce team, we're a fifth of the size, but our productivity and our results were pretty much double what we'd done with a team, 4 times bigger. So I think that speaks volume.
Absolutely. No, that does speaks volume. And you pretty much had growth of almost 2.5x or 3x in terms of the top line, and the business was still doing really well. Okay. Next is Sumit. Now, you've of course been hearing a lot about the AI side of it. What do you make of the AI, and where do you see this going? from wholesale or B2B or B2C perspective?
Like anything, I think, with the times we're living in now, AI is very much, an important part of everyone's lives. And of course, there's a lot of talk around the impact of, what it will have. And we're already starting to see that come through now. And I think you have to embrace it. And it's how do you then, implement the new technology and, the advances that are coming in with AI, and how do you embrace that and bring that into your business and benefit from it as well at the same time? Yes, it might prove that, some roles become, dormant in the future. It might be that, whether it's marketing, whether it's, software development, whether it's actual, human labor that suffers as a consequence. But it's the way of the world. And, I'm intrigued to see how it will play out of not an older generation, but I like to think of myself as a little bit more old school. And I still think that, as much as the importance of AI is playing a role, I still think, having people involved in business and having that input and having that, thought process is still vital. And it's something that I think I've always held, my relation, my almost kind of reputation on is being able to build relationships with people. And that's the one thing that, I think drives a successful business at the end of the day. And I don't see how, the intervention of AI can ever replace that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't foresee, at least for next 5 to 10 years, how AI is going to change that dynamic of any relationship, actually. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And if, let's say, if you were to give advice to somebody who's today doing B2B and now wants to start a transition into the B2C world, what advice would you give? What playbook do you think they should follow? How should they go about it? How should they approach it? Any wise words from your experience, wisdom?
Yeah, I think, as I said many times before, I think, you've got to play to your strengths. Don't try and be something that you're not and try and be, something that someone else is doing. Of course, competition is healthy. It's good to, see what else is out there in the market, but really hone in on, having a point of difference in terms of, whether it's a service that you provide, whether it's a product that you provide, and then, looking at what you can do. And I don't think you can take an approach now where, you have almost an ideal scenario where you think, I want to only keep my business in the world of B2B. I think you have to be open-minded in terms of, launch a B2B, but there's nothing stopping you alongside that in terms of launching a B2C at the same time, or vice versa. If you're going down the direct-to-consumer route to begin with, consider having, a B2B element with that as well. But I think, don't pigeonhole your thoughts in terms of thinking that your marketing strategy and your approach is very different. The same principles that you hold on the B2B side or the B2C, or, whichever way you decide to go about it, or if you're going to approach both, is have access to understand, your customers, understand your data, understand that technology is here to stay and it's only going to improve and it's only going to get stronger and stronger as, more and more years pass. So be open-minded and embrace that, almost opportunity of how you can implement that into your business and how you can, really kind of grow into an area. And the beauty of technology is you can access the world with it. If I look at being a traditional, vendor of a brand back in the day, for me to access the rest of the world meant I had to spend a lot of money on travel, spend a lot of time away. Whereas now, you can do all of this, pretty much from anywhere in the world, but
Yes.
access people. So, don't be frightened. I would very much suggest that look at this as whatever you're doing, the world is your, oyster almost in terms of who you can approach and how you can tailor make that as well.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful advice, Sumit, and that's very, very wonderful advice. And thank you for that closing note as well. Thank you so much, Sumit, for joining us on this. And if people want to reach out to you, where are you reachable on?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll find me on LinkedIn. That's a great starting point. And anyone that messages me, I'm more than happy to take time out and respond.
Perfect. Thank you, Sumit, so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Sumit Jairat for you. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we enjoyed having this conversation, and talk to you in the next episode then. Thank you.